Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. All right, welcome back to the Breakthrough Brand podcast. I am so excited about this episode because it starts our 3-week series on real estate investing, which I've been anticipating recording these episodes since literally like the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, when my husband and I, who you're going to hear in this podcast, we got started with all of this. And when we bought our first property, I asked you guys like what questions you have. And I'm really glad we didn't record a podcast back then because so much has happened. And now we have 3 properties here to talk about. And yeah, I mean, you guys sent in amazing questions and I'm really excited to answer them. So on today's episode, you'll hear myself and my husband, Adam, answering the questions you guys sent in over on Instagram all about real estate investing. And if you haven't met Adam yet, he's the best. Seriously, love him so much. And he's been a guest on my podcast actually a few times over the years. He was the first guest I ever even had on the show before I was really doing guest interviews. And I always love podcasting with him. You're going to see pretty quickly that he has so much to like share and teach on when it comes to this topic. And in each of these 3 episodes, we're tackling completely different types of questions. So there were like well over 50 questions that you guys sent in, both on like a story poll and then on the Instagram post. And I tried to group them together in a way that made sense. A lot of the questions were repeats as well. So sometimes you'll hear us read 2 versions of a question from 2 different people where it's kind of similar, but phrased a little differently. And I think we ended up like really getting through all of the questions. So we're tackling some today just to give you a little sneak peek into the topics you'll hear about, how we got started in investing, what was interesting to us about that, how you could also get started in real estate investing, what it was like buying in a seller's market. We are recording this at the end of July of 2021. So if you know anyone who has tried to buy a house in the last year, then you know what this means. Like the market has been crazy basically everywhere, especially in Middle Tennessee where we live. So we talk a lot about that and some like mindset and tactical stuff there. Going into business with your spouse. I absolutely love this topic. You guys were asking what that's like. What have we learned? Has there been anything hard about it? So we talk about that. We talk about the idea of getting an investment property before you own a home for yourself to live in. Someone sent a question about that. I think it was a really great question. So we talk about that. Did we buy these properties and pay in full for them? Or did we do mortgages? Why or why not? And then move-in ready properties versus ones that you need to do repairs on versus flips and all of that kind of stuff. We also talk about Airbnbs or long-term rentals, which one we chose and why, and like different thoughts and strategies and how each one's different, plus plenty of other stuff. I think it's like 8 questions. So that's a little sneak peek for you of what we'll get into. And there's a lot about personal finance in general throughout these 3 episodes. So even if like, as you're listening right now and as you're seeing this title, if you're like, I don't know if real estate interests me, or I definitely don't have the ability to invest in real estate right now, please still listen to these if it's interesting to you even a little bit, or if you like my podcast most of the time. I think you'll learn so much from this series, even just on a personal finance level. I think it'll give you ideas for what you can do as you grow your business to create more wealth for you and your family by investing. We talk about other ways to invest besides real estate as well, and like getting into it and all of that. So like, just know there's something for you here as well. And if you're just like, this is not for me, I have so many podcast episodes that are about all different topics in the business world. So definitely go back and maybe find some of those as well. So yeah, the next 3 weeks, we've got about a little over 2 hours worth of really tactical content for you about real estate investing. And I just absolutely hope you love these. And I cannot wait to hear your feedback. And without further ado, here is my conversation with my husband, Adam. All right, I'm sitting here with my wonderful husband, Adam, who's back on the podcast. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, glad to be back.
Okay, so I wanted to, before we dive into this topic, we've been really excited to talk about this for a while, and actually got all these questions sent to us early, maybe January or February of 2021, and then now we're recording this at the end of July. But
can I say something about that really quick?
Yeah.
That's funny because in January we had only bought one investment property and it had happened 2 weeks earlier.
Yes, which we were not going to record this episode then, but I was so excited that I asked what questions people had and would they want a podcast, and then people said they had a lot of questions.
Well, I'm just saying we don't know everything right now, but we know exponentially more than we did in January.
Yes, I'm really glad we waited on this, and that's what I wanted to say, and Adam already knows because I've given him this spiel a lot in life about being an expert on things, but we're not real estate experts, not even a little bit. But I want to talk about this as non-experts, but as just a regular person who is doing it and also doing other things. That isn't just some real estate guru kind of thing. So I think a lot of times though we feel really scared to teach about something that we feel like we don't know all the things about because we aren't a pro at it. But I want personally more non-professionals teaching me how to do this stuff, how they learned it, how they made it work with their lives and their business already and all that. So we are coming at it from that angle. And if you are someone who's been in real estate for a really long time, then you will be like, oh my gosh, I know so much more than what they're saying. So that's us here on this episode. And similar when we did an episode on finance over a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. We're definitely not pros, but we can give the perspective of recent experience, I guess, what it's like to learn something for the first time.
Yes. And also, so let's give some context. So we in this episode and then the next 2 weeks, we're answering all the questions that were in that Instagram post. A lot of them were really similar. So I've combined them, but we're literally going to be reading what you guys wrote. And to give context to what we do before we dive into the questions, we own 3 properties right now, and they're all in different parts of Middle Tennessee. And we also own the house we live in, which is in Nashville specifically. And then we started buying houses and learning about all of it, or started working towards it at the end of 2020. I guess we were talking about it a lot of 2020, though. It started we bought the first one at the beginning of 2021.
Yes. Went under contract, right, in December. And then I don't think we closed until January.
Yes. And then the second house we bought pretty close to the first one. And then the third house we bought a little bit later into the year. We have tenants in all 3. And we're recording this a little earlier than you guys will hear it. And I'm actually 36 weeks pregnant today. Yes. And you'll hear this when our baby's here, which is pretty cool. Some fun maternity leave content we got here for you.
So weird.
Yes. Okay, so let's dive into these questions. Okay, so the first question we have, really 2 people asked really similar questions, so I'm going to read both of them. So the first one was, I'd love to know more on what got y'all interested and whether you were nervous buying during a seller's market. And then someone else said, congrats, this is a goal of mine and my husband's too. He's scared to get into the market right now since demand is so high and he's worried about the market crashing. So if you have any thoughts on that, that would be great. So Adam, you want to start first talk about what got us interested?
Yes. Okay, so I know my answer for that. I actually don't know your answer for that. Mine is reading a book called The Only Investment Guide You'll Ever Need.
Which I was the person who bought that and did not read it.
Yeah, Elizabeth has never cracked the book.
I read some of it, but I did read some of it. I read that after a friend. I bought after a friend told me about it, then Adam
I read the whole thing because it was riveting. And this has probably been about 3 or 4 years ago, so well in advance of us doing any of this real estate investing. It's by a guy named Andrew Tobias. He's amazing. It's a brilliant book. If you're only going to read one book about finance, I would probably recommend this one just because he has such a whimsical, easy to follow voice. Really enjoyed it. Anyway, he goes through all the different investment asset classes and just does a brief overview on all of them. Really didn't spend a lot of time on real estate. Did a very short chapter on it. But that short chapter was enough to kind of hook me. I mean, reading that chapter, I realized, man, at some point, I will want to do this when we have enough money to do it. And you want me to keep talking about the reason it was so compelling?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can tell why I thought it was interesting, too. You go.
Yeah, I mean, he explained very quickly in that book that you're making money a lot of different ways when you're investing in real estate. So at least 3 really clear ones, right? You're making money from your profit month over month. So you have all your expenses that go into the property. That's your mortgage payment, your property taxes, utilities, HOA, whatever, your fixed expenses, insurance. And then there is the rent that the tenant pays you. If you set everything up right, you are profiting, right? Hopefully around 12% is a great number to shoot for. Okay, that's one way you're making money. And it's a good return. I mean, 12% is a good return. Second way you're making money is paying off the loan. So every time you make a mortgage payment, you guys understand this who are homeowners, you're losing some of that money. Truthfully, you're losing a lot of that money to interest and your escrow and all that kind of stuff. But you are keeping some of that money too, right? Like when you make, in our case, most of these rental properties, when you make a $700 mortgage payment, that's what most of them are around, $750. $250 is going towards the principal. Okay, that's now money in your pocket. Like you now own $250 more of that house. That's the second way you're making money. Third way you're making money, the property is appreciating, right? And maybe it will go slower, maybe it will go faster, but real estate does go up. And sometimes, like in the last year at least, it goes up dramatically. So that's 3 very clear, like undeniable ways that you're making money at the same time. And there's some others too that get a little more granular, like tax benefits and stuff like that. But Andrew Tobias introduced me to all these ideas and I was sold.
Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas-to-be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. Yeah, I love those answers. See, and you guys will be able to tell as we do this interview that I'm going to be interviewing Adam in a sense with a lot of this because we're going to talk about marriage and business together, but he's the one like doing the majority of this, like by a long shot. So, but yeah, when I think about what made me interested in it, I really don't remember, but I do know that we did. It was like last summer, so like summer of 2020 maybe, we did like a goal setting thing together where you and I were talking about things we wanted to do before we were 30 that was like more like financial type goals. And one thing we wrote about was properties. And that was like something we were talking about at the time. And I thought that sounded really fun and interesting and like a good place to invest money. So yeah, I don't really have some cool like reason though.
I think you're also, which we haven't done this yet because we haven't done a short-term rental, but you're especially drawn to like the hospitality side of short-term rentals, Airbnbs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like I think at first, when we first started talking about real estate, I was visualizing like an Airbnb where I'm like putting out chocolate for them or something like each visit, which now I'm like really glad that that's not the way ours will look right now. We're going to talk about Airbnbs too in these like 3 episodes.
Yeah,
But
well, a couple thoughts. I do think eventually we will do stuff like that.
yeah.
Second thought, some of that same attitude still bleeds into long-term rentals.
Yes, like I got to make a really fun, which we didn't do it for every tenant, which I kind of hate.
I know, but we did it for some.
Well, yeah, for some of the tenants, we did a welcome gift, and it was really fun. I went to Whole Foods just because that was like the place that made sense for some of this. But I got them like a plant and some different treats and like housewarming type gifts. And we have other ways too that we are excited about, like doing really hospitable things for tenants.
So I'm here for the money, and Elizabeth wants to give people gifts.
No, you also like the gift. You were not as into the gift thing as I was with that first.
I'm really excited about plans for Christmas gifts and stuff like that.
Yes, you have cool Christmas gift ideas. Yeah. So, okay. So that was like, that's our answer for like how we got interested in it. But okay, let's talk about the thoughts on jumping into a seller's market. Y'all, the market is so crazy right now. If you've like even thought about buying a house anywhere, you know this. Real estate, it's just as competitive for like investing, I mean. So Adam, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we're recording on July 29th, and there are already rumblings that the market is starting to turn. So maybe by the time you're listening to this, some months from now, the market might be different. But yeah, a lot of things to say about this. We did buy these in a seller's market. Like, that's a fact. You know, we bought all of ours in the first half of 2021, and that was a time when sellers had more power than buyers. So that can make some people uncomfortable. It might make you not want to buy because you feel like the market's high. Lots of thoughts here. First, it does not matter if the investment is good. And what I mean by that is if you have run the numbers and you know, which you can know, that's a great thing about real estate, right? Like, it is pretty dang predictable. But if you've run the numbers and you know that you are going to turn a profit, then there's not a ton of risk. Like, my thought this entire time as we've bought during a high market is, hey, if it does turn, and if some of these properties that we buy, all of a sudden in a year or 2 years, they're actually worth a little bit less, which, by the way, no one thinks that's going to happen, just to be clear. But if that did happen, I don't really care, because beautiful thing about this business, your expenses are fixed, right? Like, provided that you got a good mortgage, which if you're not going to get a fixed rate on your mortgage, then we shouldn't be doing this. But you will. So your mortgage is not going to change. Your interest rate is not going to change. I mean, property tax can change, but if your property tax goes up, I guess that means the value of your home went up. So that's good, right? That's not a market going down. That's a market going up. So the point is, you can get down and really crunch the numbers before making the purchase. You can know how much it's going to cost you every month, and you can get a pretty good idea of how much you're going to rent it for. Just get on Zillow and look at recently rented, just like you would look at recently sold for houses, and you can get a very good idea of what stuff is renting for in the area that you're buying, and you can know, hey, I'm going to make $500, or I'm going to make $400 or $600 every month, and that's still going to be true. Even if you're looking on Zillow 2 years later being like, oh man, the housing market's down right now, I could buy that same house for less. So what? You've been making $500 every month for the last 2 years. Aren't you glad you bought that house when you did? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. And I know the thing you were going to talk about next is like that you can't time the market. And I think so often we can, which we know people who do this, but who like you could so often just sit on money that you want to invest somewhere waiting for everything to be exactly perfect, whether it's like waiting for the stock you're interested in to be the right price or waiting to buy real estate for some reason. It's like it can be better just to like do the thing versus sitting on money in a savings account that's not doing anything for you.
Right. Like, oh my gosh, so many thoughts. I can't say them as fast as they're coming. I mean, example we just used, right? Of like you're making $500 in profit every month, but you're buying in a high market. So there's always the possibility. Just let's think about this for a second. Let's imagine that the same house, one of the rentals that we bought, that all of a sudden in 2023, maybe the housing market will be down and I could get it for $15,000 less. Okay, we will have made a lot more than $15,000 between now and then. Not even looking at the appreciation, just looking at month over month rent and the loan repayment, right? And then also tax benefits. We haven't even gotten into that. Point is, to Elizabeth's point with timing the market, generally speaking, in investing, like, action is favorable over inaction, right?
Which I love action. Taking action on stuff.
Do you want to tell the story about our house?
Yeah, so if we're thinking about timing the market, so when did we buy our house? The house we live in is what we're talking
We
about.
bought it in April of 2019.
Yes. Okay. So when we were buying, like when we were starting to think about houses, when we were looking at houses, we had multiple people tell us who were realtors and people who weren't realtors, but people who like knew this stuff. You need to wait. The market's going to turn. Everything's about to go down. This is not the right time to buy. And we're so glad we didn't wait because like pretty quickly after that is when everything got way more expensive. And when we bought, actually, it was not competitive at all. Like, it's like we never felt like we put an offer on this house and like negotiated quite a bit, which is not what's happening now.
Yeah, and the point you're making is truly in Middle Tennessee, the market was high then, right? But nobody has a crystal ball. Like, no one knew that while, yes, it was high in 2019 compared to where it had been, it was only going higher for the next 2.5 years, which is what we've seen, right? Like, it's so much worse now than it was then. The point is you don't know the future. Like, it's the same is true of the stock market. Like, you cannot time the market. You cannot predict it. So do something. Don't sit on your hands because you don't know what the future is going to hold, right?
Yes. Okay. So I feel like we answered that one well.
Yeah, there was a lot more to say.
Yeah, which we have more questions that are similar to that
I mean,
one.
a couple more thoughts, guys. Rents are going up too. Like,
yeah,
we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, we have again, some people like y'all asked really good questions. They're super specific. So we'll keep covering this. So keep coming back for the next like 2 weeks on these. Okay. So one question we had a lot of variations of was like going into business with your spouse. What is that like? Any hurdles, any tips? So I'll start here. I would say you need to know clearly who will be doing what and divide up things, have clear expectations, talk about who's doing what, who's responsible for what. And I don't think doing 50-50 works. And it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast with Lauren Everts and her husband, Michael Bostic. I listen to their podcast sometimes, but they were talking about this because they own a lot of businesses together. And they made the point of like, they don't ever do anything 50-50. It's like never 50-50 as business owners together, which is like, you don't ever have two CEOs. Like that typically does not work. One of them needs to be the one that's like the second in command, so to speak. So I think one person needs to be more in charge of it and the other person needs to be supporting other ways. But also that you both need to completely know what's happening. Again, like if Adam were to make, like, say, a bad decision on something, it does not need to be able to be like, well, I didn't know and you screwed up or whatever. Like we've set it up to where that would not happen because we both are super informed. And then for us in the season of life we're in right now, it made so much more sense for Adam to be the person that was the like point person on this. One, you were more excited about it. Like you had a lot of excitement about learning about real estate. But for me, I like felt like literally this whole year, like I did not have the capacity in my brain to learn about real estate because I was learning about having a baby, which Adam was also learning about that. But then I've
read some books.
Yeah, he knows a lot. He's totally prepared.
I've seen a couple birth videos on YouTube.
But I was like doing that. And then also I mean, you guys who listen regularly know this, but I created Booked Out Designer start to finish and launched it twice and made some new website templates and all sorts of other things in my business. And it was like, I mentally like could not also handle becoming like an expert on real estate. Not that we're experts, but you know what I mean? Like learning all the things on it. But Adam was like in a place where he's like, yeah, I'm like ready to do that right now. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I agree entirely. One additional thought about the value of having somebody who's the point person. Sometimes you have to move really quickly. I mean, just thinking about the nature of real estate, especially in the last year, when you need to make an offer, you need to make an offer. It's got to happen fast. So having one person who is, I guess, a little bit more engaged in the process is helpful when fast decisions have to be made. And it's quicker if it can be a little bit more of like a unilateral, like one person knows what's going on and they're saying, hey, we need to do this. Let's make the offer. It would be slower if everything was happening completely by committee, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that's just an example of value of having one person who is a little more responsible for it. But on the flip side, to Elizabeth's point, to avoid the potential pitfalls of one person having all of the responsibility, and then if it goes bad, it's completely on that person. Yeah, over communication. Like, even though I was maybe taking on more of the responsibility to learn what needed to be learned and to go out and do the tasks that needed to get done, information always was flowing very freely. Like, being very transparent, keeping Elizabeth very updated on what's happening, explaining to her why I think the things that we're doing are good ideas. That's kind of what it looked like for us, how we brought together those two things of one person being a little bit more responsible for it, but the other person still having a really good view of what's going on.
Yeah, and for example, to like put that into like what it actually looked like, I never went and saw houses with Adam and our realtor Sarah Clark. I did when we first started. We wanted me to be able to see every property. I think was kind of our mindset.
We actually own a property you've never seen.
Yes, which is interesting. There's one we own I've never seen in person, and the listing photos were really bad. So I feel like in reality I have not seen it. I do have a visual in my mind for what I think it looks like, but it could be totally wrong. But yeah, at first we were like, we're both going to go look at all of them. And then pretty quickly, again, with everything being so fast and competitive, we realized that was not going to work. Because again, we were buying where they're all in Middle Tennessee, but some of them are not directly in Nashville. And so they're not like close by our house sort of thing. Yeah, and then so we before putting in offers, I always was like, Adam would come to me and say, here's what it costs. Here's like why I think it's a good thing to put an offer in on. And here's like photos of the listing. Like I would look at the listings and that sort of thing. So it was like we both were saying yes, but a lot of times that was even happening like over text of like, all right, we're going to put an offer on this.
Yeah, but even that, I mean, if I can't explain quickly in like 5 minutes in like in a clear, compelling way why this is a good idea, then it's probably not that good of an idea. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like if the plan is fleshed out and it's a good plan, then I can show Elizabeth really quickly on paper and with a calculator how this is a good idea. And if that's not possible, then that probably means you didn't think about it hard enough and it might not be the house that you want.
Yeah, so even if you and your spouse are both like trying to do more like 50-50, y'all should both be able to do that before putting, which I mean, we'll talk about this later, but we've had to put in a lot of offers, just that we didn't even see the properties on some of the time because of how competitive it was. But like you need to still be able to know why. But it is fun going into business with your spouse. It was fun doing the like LLC thing, which we'll talk about later too, and like going to closings together and all of that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it has been really fun.
Yeah. Okay, so third question. This one this will be a shorter answer. So someone asked, I'm curious if you've already purchased a house for yourself to live in. I'm currently renting a house, but I want to buy a rental property this year. It feels weird to buy my first house that I wouldn't live in. Does that sound silly? You want to start? Or you want me to start on it? I know you don't have as much to say on this one, maybe.
Well, I think I kind of see where you're going with it, but yeah, go ahead and start.
Okay, yeah. I mean, our answer is we don't think that's weird at all. And I actually, I don't know, I can't remember who asked this, so I don't know like your actual situation, but I feel like it could be super smart to do that. Like if you are sitting on money that you're wanting to invest somewhere and you're like looking at your life being like, I have enough money to buy a house right now to invest in that way, but like, I don't want to like move right now. Like maybe you are single and you're like, I don't need a house just for myself. I'm enjoying living with roommates in this cool part of the city, but I have money I want to invest. Like that could totally be a great way to invest money, especially if you're like, maybe you're living somewhere and you don't know how long you'll keep living there. You could still invest in a property and keep it when you move even and have a property manager. So I don't think it's weird. I think it could actually be really smart, and probably more people should do things like that, honestly, than like feeling like that the first house has to be their own.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. Great thoughts. I actually hadn't thought about that, of how it would be a great way to spend money if your life situation does not really allow you to want to put down roots. Like you don't know if you want to live in a place long term, so you don't want to buy, you want to keep renting. That doesn't mean you can't buy a rental property. I mean, so what if you move, or so what if it's not in the right part of town? Like, ideally, you could be very far away from it, and it won't matter. So that's a good point.
And then eventually it could be that, like, you sell that property to buy your first home for yourself, or it could be that you have this extra flow of income from it being a long-term rental or an Airbnb, whatever it is. So Good for you for thinking about that. Okay, the next question we got, this is a little bit of a longer one. I would love to know if you bought these properties while having a mortgage on your current home, and if so, did you find that was a complication? I'm also super curious if you saved to be able to buy these outright, so like paying in full on it, or if you choose to take mortgages out on the properties. Basically, I want all the money details. I think I remember who said this. Yeah, okay, let's go.
Well, yeah, so I'm looking at my notes that I wrote in our little shared document, and my first point was God bless whoever asked this question. And
Adam, means that nice.
Yeah, I mean that in a positive way. I don't mean like God bless you, you poor thing. I mean God bless you, you are asking all the right questions. Like that's the correct thing to be thinking.
Normally in the South, that's a negative thing. If we say God bless you.
Oh no, I mean legitimately, like God bless you. Like yeah, emphasis, weird sentence stuff. I feel great. I love the person who asked this question. So what is the question exactly?
Well, it's kind of like...
No, we did not pay off our house.
Yeah, so we do have a mortgage on our house is the first answer to that.
Right.
And we also have mortgages on all 3 of the rentals, which my short answer that I put in our notes is that is the best way to leverage your money is to do that versus being like, I'm going to pay off. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but you put notes on, you answer it.
It is not the best use of money to pay off the mortgage on your primary residence where you live. And it is also not the best use of money to buy rental properties outright for a lot of different reasons. A big part of why people love the business of real estate investing is because it's like the easiest business in the world to get people to loan you money, right? Like you've heard the phrase, it takes money to make money. And that's true in a lot of businesses. And it's really hard to get money. But guess what? It's actually not that hard, comparatively speaking, to get banks to give you money to do this business. They give these mortgages out all the time to basically anyone. And they're loaning you money at very cheap interest rates compared to, even if interest rates were higher than they are right now, still cheap compared to any other like borrowing money for a business kind of setting. So you don't want to have no debt in this business. You actually want to have some debt because that is people giving you money that you wouldn't otherwise have that then you can turn around and use to turn a profit. Okay, so we're going to compare 2 scenarios. One where you invest by just having a completely paid off property, and then another example where you are taking money and stretching it out across a bunch of different properties and taking on a lot of debt because each property will have a mortgage, right? And we're going to compare what the profit looks like from each so that you can get a visual of how stretching your money out leads to more profit rather than paying things off.
You could write this down even as he's saying it, maybe to look at it visually. That might be helpful.
So let's say you have $300,000 and you go out and you buy a $300,000 house. You have completely paid for it in full. You are debt free. You've taken on no debt. At least in the Middle Tennessee area, you're going to rent a $300,000 house for around, depending on where it is, around $2,200 a month. That would be really good, actually. You should feel really good about that as a landlord. Okay, so now you're going to multiply that by 12. So $2,200 by 12 gets you $26,400. So that's your profit. Awesome. You're making just over about $26,500 every year off of your $300,000 investment. That return on investment is 8.8%. That's how much money you're making on the $300,000. Hey, 8.8% is good. That's actually comparable to the stock market. Those of you who like the stock market and learn about it, over its lifetime, it's averaged around a 9% return. Now let's talk about scenario number 2, where you have a lot of mortgages and a lot of debt. So you've got the same $300,000. But instead of sinking it all into one property, we're going to stretch it across 6 this time. And you're putting $50,000 into each one, which is the perfect number, right? Like that's enough for you to put down 20% on $200,000 properties-ish. And that would be $40,000, right? Yes, that would be $40,000. And then you've got $10,000 left over for closing costs and whatever kind of startup costs you have after getting the house, right? So now you've got 6 properties. You've got $50,000 invested in each of them. It's the same $300,000. Now you're going to have a mortgage payment on each one of them. But if you're renting all of them for around 1,500, 1,600, which you definitely can in Middle Tennessee. Like I'm using numbers and information from the rental properties we've done. No reason in the world that you can't profit at least $500 a month. Maybe even better than that. 600 is, we have one property, which we'll talk about the profit margins on our properties later maybe, but we have one that profits $600 a month. Like, this is very realistic, very doable. Okay, now do the math. If you've got 6 properties and all of them are profiting $500 a month, what is that, $3,000 a month times 12? Hey, that's $36,000. That's a nice $10,000 more than in scenario number 1. And our return on investment is 12% this time, which, by the way, the way you calculate return on investment in the simplest, fastest way is just to divide your profit by your initial investment. So in this case, it'd be $36,000 divided by $300,000, 12% return, right? That's already better. That's already better than the first scenario. We're already up about 10 grand, right? But now think about this. In scenario number 1, you have one house that is appreciating in value. In scenario number 2, you have 6 houses that are all appreciating in value. In scenario number 1, you're not netting any money from loan repayment because you don't have a mortgage. So that additional, $250, $300, whatever that you're profiting in some sense every month when you make a mortgage payment, that doesn't even exist in scenario 1 because there is no mortgage payment. In scenario 2, it exists 6 times over. Let's say you're making $250 off of every mortgage payment. Oh my gosh, you're over times 6? You're making $1,500 every month just by making your mortgage payments. Do you see what I'm saying? Which I realize as I asked that, no one can respond to me.
I see what you're saying.
Elizabeth sees what I'm saying of like that $300,000 all sunk into one property, not the best way to invest. That $300,000 stretched out across 6 properties, way more profitable. Hopefully this comes through clear because this is a very important point.
Yet if you wanted to listen again and write it down as he's saying it, I was reading what he wrote as he said it there. But yeah, I mean, that's so true. And that's clearly the direction we've chosen to go as we have 3 properties right now. And we do want to do more of that. And another thought I even have with this question is waiting until you have enough money to buy a property outright means that you are going to probably be waiting a really long time in most scenarios, which means not taking action longer. It means longer of your money not working for you in any regard. So that's another negative to the waiting, even besides the fact that it's literally not necessary. So
I love it. I think we've made our point.
All right. Okay, so then question number 5, are you buying these properties ready to go, or are you going to do work on them? So Adam can kind of explain our logic behind this, but basically the first property we bought was seriously so gorgeous, move-in ready. We both commented so many times, we wish we lived here back when we were renting because it was totally beautiful. We did not change anything on it. The only thing we had to do was buy a bathroom mirror because the owner had a custom mirror in there and they removed it and took it with them. So Adam got us one at Kirkland's to replace that one. The second property, we painted the whole thing. And originally, Adam wanted to actually redo all the floors as well. That's the one I never saw, right? Yeah, that's one I haven't seen. But Adam recorded a video for me walking around showing the floors. And then that's when I was like, they don't actually look bad, was my thought. I was like, they actually look pretty good. The walls were horrible, though. It was really dark colors, a lot of the rooms.
Yeah, they were beat up. I mean, it needed some drywall. There were little holes and rough spots and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we did hire painters. We had the whole thing painted, and then for the floors, we left them. And that's something that will probably eventually need to be replaced, but not right now.
Yes, you were correct that there was more life in those floors, which is great. Right now, every time we collect a rent check from that property, we are getting some more value out of those floors. They are still rough. I mean, after this tenant, whenever someone moves out and someone else moves in, we'll still have to redo those floors, but that's okay.
Yeah, then the third, what do we do in the third? We not much on that one, right? I'm trying to remember. The third one I have seen. The second property is one I haven't seen.
Yeah, we didn't have to do as much. Not really anything.
Was there any painting?
No. Okay. I had to paint a couple doors. It was aesthetic stuff. The aesthetic stuff was good. The things that I had to do with it was more little fixes, kind of little handyman stuff that need to be done.
And long term, we're interested. I know in both of the second 2 properties, it would be nice to upgrade the lighting fixtures over like the dining area and some things like that just to like make it nicer. But it's both of them were like plenty good to go. But the first one really does stand out of like it's super like designery and pretty and that sort of thing. So yeah, so then Adam, say why we did not want to do anything with crazy renovations at first, but how like that could work. Be a good thing actually.
Yeah, we bought houses that were pretty close to or ready to go. That's not necessarily the right answer. I mean, the reason that we did that is just because it was simple. Like, we were figuring this out for the first time, and there were a lot of new factors and a lot of stuff to learn, and we didn't really want to add anything to the to-do list that didn't have to be there. So I was drawn to the simplicity of properties that, except for a few small things, painting or a few little handyman jobs, are pretty close to ready to go. Having said it, that probably the best approach is to try to buy houses. This is if you're not trying to do flips. Flips is a whole different conversation. But if you're not trying to do flips and you're just trying to do kind of long-term rentals, a great strategy is to try to buy houses that just need cosmetic work. Like, they need to be painted, maybe they need some drywall work, maybe they need some new floors, maybe they need something done to the kitchen cabinets. Point is, nothing major, nothing structural, nothing having to do with the electric system or the plumbing or all that kind of stuff. That is for the flipping world. But if it's just aesthetic stuff, the truth is those jobs are normally pretty cheap. Like, I mean, for $10,000, if it's a relatively small house, like a 2-bedroom, for $10,000, you can make it look really nice and new. That'll do the floors and the walls. And you're probably going to get those properties a little bit easier because there's less competition, because when people open up Zillow and they see photos that to them look ugly, they immediately exit out. And you can look at it and go, that actually just looks like about a $10,000 fix, and that place is going to be beautiful. So if there's cosmetic issues, that far from being a bad thing might actually be a good thing.
Yeah, great answer. Love that. So yeah, that's our answer on that one. We've a little bit of work, not too much work, but nothing wrong with needing to do work on the properties. Okay, we have 2 more questions. Oh, wait, we actually might change some. Well, yeah, we have like 2 more questions left. Okay, so this one, short one. Biggest question I'm dying to know is whether you actually purchase these properties. I've heard about people getting into Airbnbs by leasing places. I think that's so fascinating. We actually aren't super familiar with that as a thing. I think I know what this person was talking about. And I told Adam that, like, I think that's where people are kind of doing the property manager thing, like, and take, like, basically being property managers, maybe. I don't know. We don't know about that, and we did buy all of ours, is the answer.
Yeah, maybe this is like a subleasing situation where a person doesn't actually own the property. They're renting the property, but then subleasing it through Airbnb. Yeah, truthfully, I don't know anything about that. But sounds interesting if a person's figured out a way to do that.
Yeah, maybe if that sounds interesting, you do a little Google search there on that, because we don't really know. Okay. All right. This one kind of relates to that. I'd love to know how you decided between Airbnbs and long-term rentals, and how you or Adam knew the property. This was when we only had one, the person asked this, but how we knew each property was the right one to offer on. So let's start with how we decide on to do long-term rentals for these versus Airbnbs. So I'll say first, which we already kind of talked about this, like, I think Airbnbs sound more fun and flashy. Like, and the people can think it sounds so cool. Like I was saying, of like, you get to kind of like be hospitable towards people. You get to like say you have this cool property somewhere that people can come stay at and post, make it a little social media page, its own little business sort of thing. And that can sound really fun, especially if you're talking about like vacation rentals somewhere you want to travel to, which I know we eventually want to do that. But Airbnbs are more complicated. There's a lot more learning and different elements to it, a lot more work involved. And so for us, I would say if you're like, what we decide, I mean, if you're like someone who's like, I've set on Airbnbs, but maybe you're not taking any action because you are like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to learn. I don't know how to like figure all this out. It's great to start with something easier to take action on, which could be for you long-term properties. It could be stock market, something like that. But yeah, we like the way we did it. I love the long-term rental way and the way it works and the amount of work it appears to be and all of that. So,
yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. Short-term rentals, to be clear, short-term rentals do present a larger upside. Like, that's just a fact. Like, just think about it, okay? If you're able to rent out an Airbnb for $120 a night, which is really realistic, like there's nothing about that that's too expensive. Let's say you fill it 22 nights a month, hey, we're talking about $2,600, well, $2,640. That's probably a lot more than you would rent that month over month in like a long-term lease situation. So to be clear, there's a lot that's attractive about an Airbnb. As Elizabeth's saying, it is more work. You got to worry about cleaning crews, right? You have to get it cleaned every time somebody stays there.
But that number you just said would not actually be the number
getting. That would not be your take home.
You need to run numbers almost more carefully, I would think.
Yes,
because there's more nuances.
But there is still more upside there if everything goes to plan. You got to communicate with a lot more people. Instead of having one tenant who's in there for a year, who ideally some months you never hear from them, you're going to have to communicate with however many different parties come in and out of this short-term rental every month, which then maybe you don't want to do that. Now you have to hire a property manager. That's an additional expense that at least we've been able to avoid. So there's also a lot of things that can go wrong. Like something like COVID can have a huge effect on the Airbnb scene. It doesn't really have an effect, or not much of one, comparatively speaking, to long-term rentals. Laws can change. Like Airbnb and short-term rentals kind of exist at the mercy of whatever the local government's stance towards them are. That can always change. So there's more risk, there's more variables, but there is more money. I mean, like we will end up trying to do one of those eventually. Just didn't want to start with something that was more complicated.
Yeah, and it'll feel easier for us when we do an Airbnb because we already have experience doing long-term rentals. So, yeah. Okay, and then the second part of that question, like how did you know it was the one to offer on? I had to put his notes. We all made offers on like 1,000, which is so true. And like I said earlier, we like started off trying to like, I think our mindset was like, we're both going to go look at them in person every time. And then it went to like, okay, Adam's going to look at them all in person and not Elizabeth. And then it went to like, we put in offers on ones that Adam did not see in person, but we like found the listing and put in an offer. And we got really used to putting in offers and not getting accepted to where putting in offers did feel like less of a big deal, at least to me. It was like, well, you know, I'm not going to like spend hours like obsessing over this, like, because we might not get it. What would you say about that?
Yeah, here's my quick thought. You just need to let go of the pickiness around the property. And I'm not saying to buy a piece of crap house, okay? Like, no, like you want to buy something that's in good condition, that doesn't have any major flaws. You want to look at things like the square footage, like how much storage space, like all that stuff is really important. What I'm saying is you've got to let go of the, I want this place to look really pretty, like a place that I would want to live in. Because, first of all, your tenants, they don't really care that much. You got to remember that the renting crowd is generally less picky than the buying crowd.
Yes, which is just real quick on that. Like we rented for quite a few years. 4 years, okay. And our apartment was so like not pretty. Like the way it was, like
it's not a good
the
wall
cabinets
color.
were ugly, the lighting was ugly, but like I never cared. It was like a different mindset than when you're buying to own it.
Exactly. And when you're in the position of buying the investment property, sometimes you can get in that buyer's mindset like you have with your own personal house that you're going to purchase, and you're like, everything needs to be perfect. But then you're going to turn around and rent it to tenants who are a little bit more like, I'm only living here for a year. That wall color looks fine. So point is, don't get so hung up on, is this thing going to be able to be rented? It will. People rent everything. So that's my thought.
Yeah, and one thing too, when you think about, especially those properties that do feel like so, like they look like a place that someone would buy as their like primary residence to live in, you are competing with people who are like buying their forever home, and they are willing to spend a lot more money right now and do like ridiculous offers because they're not trying to make money on it. So that's actually, I mean, I know, like you said, the market could be turning, but like at least for when we've been buying these, it's like, yeah, someone who's like buying this to live in, they're trying to get the right school zoning for their kid. They're like might do a ridiculous amount over asking because they're not thinking about the return. And you as an investor, like, yeah, I'm not going to do that, which we did offer over asking on our third property and like, did over asking, but not that much over.
Yeah, we're talking like $2,000 over asking.
Yeah, which a lot of like around Nashville right now, I mean, stuff is seriously going sometimes for like 50, 80,000 over asking. So yeah, that is our thought on that one. All right, so that is it for this episode. We actually have another question we were going to put on this one, but we're going to push it to next week because this one's gotten a little long. So come back next week because we have like seriously so many more things to talk about because again, you guys asked really great questions. And if you're finding these episodes later, then like that's really cool because all three of them are there. So you can just go ahead and go listen to the next one. But I'll be sure to like do a post on Instagram too a week this airs. And so if you have additional questions where you're like, okay, you said this, but I want to know more about it, go comment there. I can even get Adam to give a little input. And so we can both answer your question there.
Weigh in.
But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it's so different than normal stuff on the podcast, but this is something that like you can tell we both really have found this interesting and fun. And so I hope you did too. So yeah, we'll be back next week with another one.
See you next time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast and all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to encourage you to check out my website where you'll find tons of resources to help you grow a profitable and sustainable business. Over on ElizabethMcCravey.com, you'll find free workbooks to help you figure out things like the best headline for your sales page. There's a freebie with my favorite journal prompts to start your day with, a guide on website essentials for all you coaches, and so much more. And you'll find my top business tools. Yes, I literally list out all the major ones for you on my website, and there are tons of special discounts and offers for you guys to snag as you try these products and services. You'll also find the main ways to work with me. First, through my Show It website template shop that helps you DIY your way to a strategic website for your business. These website templates are easy to use, they're gorgeously designed, and they have all the strategy I'm teaching on this podcast just woven into them, and I have a feeling you'll really love them. You'll also find my course and coaching program for designers, Booked Out Designer. In this program, I teach you everything I did to build an in-demand design business so that you can create a thriving business for yourself as a brand or website designer. So if all of that interests you, go to ElizabethMcCravey.com. To access those tools and free downloads, head to the tools page at ElizabethMcCravey.com/tools. And to see the different ways to work with me, simply click over to the Ways to Work Together page. I hope you have so much fun exploring everything over there. And don't forget that you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. And leaving a rating and review for the show, sharing it with a friend, sharing it on social media are all great ways for you to support this podcast. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again next week.